This is Goss's Garage with Pat Goss, co-host of PBS's MotorWeek. He'll take your calls and comments now at 844-885-4677 or email him at radio@goss-garage.com. And now, Pat Goss.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Goss's Garage. I'm Pat Goss. If you'd like to talk about cars, give me a call, 844-885-4677. We can talk about anything that deals with cars, or at least something with an engine in it. Most engines work the same way, so it doesn't make any difference whether it's one cylinder or 20 cylinders. It all works the same. All right, hey, big holiday weekend. You know, Christmas is on Monday, and my goodness gracious, so many of you are going to be on the road, and I want to wish you a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. But with all of you folks on the road, think about it. 1,200 is a lot of people, but that's about how many will die on our highways over this holiday season. Sadly, many of those fatalities will be people minding their own business, driving safely. They're killed due to the actions of a drunk or distracted driver. Now, if you're going to be on the road over the next couple of weeks, it pays to be defensive, highly alert, and 100% sober. Between Thanksgiving and New Year's, 1,200 people will die, and 25,000 will be injured in traffic accidents related to alcohol. But making matters worse is the fact that many drivers will have accidents, some fatal, simply due to fatigue. The huge list of chores and activities during the holiday season often means significantly reduced sleep. Now, according to a study by the AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety, people who sleep 6 to 7 hours per night are twice as likely to be involved in an accident as those sleeping 8 hours or more, while people sleeping less than 5 hours increase their accident risk up to 5 times. So, even though you don't drink and drive, if you don't get enough sleep, you could be in danger. Then there's distracted driving, which increases during the holidays due to more things to get done and our reliance on phones to get those things done. But studies show that 2 seconds with your eyes on your phone instead of the road makes your risk of having an accident 24 times greater. Now that's truly scary. So how can you possibly be safe? Well, if you drink, don't drive. If you text, don't text. Read messages or allow yourself to be distracted, because distracted driving is very much like driving drunk. When you text, you're not looking at what you should be looking at, you're doing something other than driving, and you're thinking about something other than driving. Other things to do? Check weather and road conditions before you leave. Allow plenty of space between you and the car ahead of you. In cold temperatures, allow even more space. And slow down, because tires lose traction when the temperature drops. Don't use cruise control in the rain, snow, or in icy conditions. Try not to drive between midnight and 3 a.m. because that's when drunk driving accidents are most likely. If you don't drink and don't text while driving, watch for other drivers who show signs of drunk or distracted driving and call 911. Watch for cars going too fast or too slow, weaving in and out of traffic, taking too long to leave the light when it turns green. That's just a few. Not driving, staying home and throwing a party. Well, remember, if you serve alcohol, you could be responsible if someone drinks and drives and has an accident after leaving your party. Remember, alcohol is the same, no matter what form it takes. A 12-ounce can of beer has roughly the same amount of alcohol as a 6-ounce glass of wine and a 1.5-ounce shot of whiskey. Alcohol takes time to metabolize out of your system, and drinking coffee won't speed up the process at all. Be aware that drinking on an empty stomach will allow the alcohol to enter your bloodstream much faster and you to get drunk much faster. All right, just some things that you should be aware of, and you really, really, truly have to be careful out there. You sit down, if you want something really sobering, go on to the internet and do a search regarding accidents relative to drunk driving and distracted driving and things like that. And you will very quickly find out that this is a major, major problem. And, you know, it's something that people, a lot of young people, especially with the distracted driving, a lot of young people are very cavalier about this. And a lot of older people are very cavalier about their drinking habits. So if you look at the statistics, they are absolutely and utterly shocking. And when you see the damage that distracting and drunk driving does, it's pretty scary. So keep that in mind. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll come back, and we've got some really interesting questions coming up. 844-885-4677. Give me a call.
Stay tuned. Pat will take your calls next at 844-885-4677. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
Never drive with a bad attitude. I know that's hard with so many stupid, distracted, aggressive, and just plain rude drivers on the road, but it really is the safe thing to do. I drive a lot, and I used to see reckless, rude, or aggressive drivers maybe once a month. But today, it seems like every other driver is doing something stupid. When it was sporadic, it wasn't so hard to deal with, but now it seems like there's always an idiot 3 feet from my rear bumper or weaving into my lane or cutting me off. Distracted? Probably. Dangerous? Absolutely. But there's nothing to do except drive defensively and not aggravate other drivers. Much as I'd like to, I don't middle finger the offending driver, and definitely don't hit my brakes to scare a tailgater. Initially, these situations may be simple mistakes, but an aggressive response to a mistake can escalate it into a personal confrontation, which can easily turn into road rage. Unfortunately, you have no idea which one of these idiots will try to hurt you with their car, a weapon, or their fists. Also, never make direct eye contact with the offending driver. If you're the offender, be courteous and get out of the way. Whether it's a mistake or intentional aggression, remember, back down, yield, let it go. It takes brains to overcome anger. Use your brain. Be smart. This news and views is from Auto Care Pro magazine and deals with automatic transmissions. Although their story relates to an Audi that refused to shift, it could apply to most cars. In this case, the tech did all the proper preliminary tests, including a visual inspection of related parts, which revealed a badly corroded transmission computer. Seems someone had replaced the cabin air filter and didn't properly install its cover. Now, this allowed water to leak onto the computer, and over time the water caused corrosion and no shift. A new module made the Audi shift like new. The tech also reinstalled the cabin air filter cover properly. There are two primary lessons here. First, just because the symptoms are horrific doesn't mean the cause is horrific. In fact, seemingly huge problems may be cheap to fix. Second, this is a case where you'll probably be taken if you didn't pick a good shop. That's because you've already convinced yourself you need a major repair, and when the shop confirms what you suspect, you just go for it. This shop could have easily sold a completely unnecessary transmission, but instead was honest and saved the owner thousands of dollars. So select your shop carefully. Rather than just cheap, look for ASE certification, skill, quality, and above all, honesty. Too often, the cheapest estimates come from shops with overall lower skill sets, or in some cases, something much worse, more greed and less honesty.
This is Goss's Garage with Pat Goss. Call the show now at 844-885-4677.
Yes. Welcome back, everybody. For those of you enjoying Goss's Garage on TuneIn.com, please note our new show time every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. Also, remember that you can call in 24/7 on our hotline, 844-885-4677. When we're not on the air, you can leave a message. We'll return your call and answer your question, or we'll set it up so that you can call back when we are on the air. But one way or another, just leave your message. And please, what we need here, we get a lot of people to call in, and then we get this silence. I don't know what that's about. But anyway, call in, leave a message, leave a contact number so we can call you back, and we will get to an answer, we certainly hope anyway, or we'll give it our best try. All right, let's talk to Brian from North Idaho. Brian, welcome to Goss's Garage.
Good morning, Pat.
Yes,
Good
sir.
to hear you again. I have been watching your present and a few past videos as well, and you have commented on the road rage subject.
Yeah.
And I had an interesting story that I'll make quick and share with you about that type of thing. I am now 54 years old. I turned 54 on the 18th. When I was just a young pup, the young age of 17, I got married, and my wife that I married had a young son, a new son, and I was driving down a road, Interstate 90, in fact, in eastern Washington, when I was 17 years old. He was the son, I think, was maybe 6 or 7 months old at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And this man was tailgating me, right? He was right on my rear bumper, and that irritated me to no end, as it might anyone that's 18 years old. And so I decided to step on my brake to tell him, get off my rear bumper, because that was the thing to do, right? No. Because I don't know who this guy was, but it really just inflamed him more. And now I've got my new wife, my 6-month-old stepchild in the car, and this guy is going around me, getting in front of me. He is mad that I did that.
Right.
And I didn't even assault him. I didn't get out of my car in the middle of the freeway and assault him, but what I did was wrong. And he followed me for about 40 miles on that interstate.
Oh, Lord.
And I finally got fed up. Yeah, and I finally got fed up. I'm pulling off because I was going to confront this guy. And thank God he was blusterous. He kept going.
Yeah, that's a lucky one.
That could have ended very, very badly.
Yeah,
So,
today,
at the age of 18, yes.
Today, at the same circumstance, could easily get you shot or stabbed or beaten up or a dozen different ways hurt.
Exactly. My point is, I appreciated you bringing that point up, because now that I'm 54, but there are a lot of 16, 18-year-olds out there on the highway today that need to hear the message that you've been giving on your program. So I wanted to bring that up.
We certainly try, and I appreciate the comments.
Now, can I bring up something completely unrelated?
Sure.
I have a daughter that's 27. She's married. She has my three lovely granddaughters, 9, 5, and 2. They just bought a brand new Toyota Camry.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want to be able to help her keep that car reliable.
Right.
But I haven't been a technician for 40, well, not 40 years. I'm only 54. For 30 years. I was a technician when I was 18, 19, 20 years old.
Mm-hmm.
But cars have changed so much. And it's kind of an open-ended question, but how can I help her maintain that car so it's reliable for them?
All right. Reliability these days is primarily going to be preventive maintenance. Oil changes, good oil, of course, good filters.
Air pressure, yeah.
Tire pressure, keeping the battery cables and terminals at the battery clean, because everything is computerized, and voltage spikes and stuff like that from dirty or loose cables can damage the various modules. Changing transmission fluid, flush at a reasonable interval, around 30,000 miles. Power steering on that is probably electric, so there wouldn't be any service there. There's nothing really to lubricate anymore except hinges and stuff like that. And you'd be surprised how many cars we see that have been to, all their life they've had good oil changes and so on, but they've always gone to the quick service lane. And typically no one in a quick service lane ever lubricates a hinge, rented lips, good Lord. Lubricates
That's all right.
a hinge or a door latch or anything like that. So we see lots of cars that have impeccable maintenance as far as oil changes are concerned, but none of the stuff around it has ever been done. And we get them in where the door latches are bad.
So the engine and transmission, they're good for another 200,000 miles, but the doors are literally falling off.
Exactly. And, a $6 can of white lithium grease, and grease the door hinges and the rod that holds the door open, and the latches in particular, because most door latches these days are built as an assembly, and they have the locking mechanism, usually the electric portion, and they often have a switch in there for the dome lights and all that stuff. It's all built into that door latch. And if they aren't kept lubricated,
right,
what happens is the door won't close properly, and then people start slamming it to get it closed. Once you do that, you start breaking up the electronics that are in that latch, and then you're staring down sometimes a $300 or $400 repair.
Right. So familiarize oneself with the new needs,
Yep.
so to speak, and
Exactly.
then do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that makes sense. Because as a mechanic for my daughter, I felt useless. I feel useless, and because cars aren't anywhere near the same they were when I was working on them.
Oh no, no.
That's why I wanted your opinion on it.
Yeah.
And that makes perfect sense.
But
Yeah.
the biggest
All right,
thing
Pat,
of
well,
all
thank
is
you
the
very
clean
much.
battery cables.
Yep, got that.
Okay.
Thank you, Pat.
Happy holidays. All right. Let's see. We have Victor over here. Victor says, "Good morning, Pat. My name is Victor from Chicago. I have some quick questions. How long should I warm up my car during the winter? And what's better, direct injection or naturally aspirated engines for reliability? Thank you." All right, Victor, as far as warming up cars, That is something that there is so much bad information out there about. You know, cars should not be warmed up for an extended period of time. It's bad for the car. Yet, just about everyone on the planet thinks that you got to warm up a car to keep from damaging it and make it last a long time. Not the case. Normally, your warm-up period should be 60 to 120 seconds. That's 1 to 2 minutes. And the shorter you can make that, the better it is. Now, the reason for this is real simple. If you let a car sit and warm up for an extended period of time, what are you actually warming? Well, you're warming the coolant in the radiator, so your butt is going to have a warm seat to sit on because the heater is going to be working. Now, what about the engine, though? Well, there's a lot more to an engine that needs to be warmed up than just the coolant. The oil, for instance, an oil temperature really doesn't climb that much when an engine is sitting and idling. I've seen them sit and idle for an hour or more and still have a very low or virtually cold oil temperature. The other thing is that even if you were warming the whole engine up, every part of it, that's all you're doing. You're not warming up the power steering. You're not warming up the transmission. You're not warming up the tires or the wheel and axle bearings or any of these things. So warming up just the coolant in the radiator doesn't do a whole lot for the engine. So 1 minute on a cold day, now of course there will be days when you have to go longer than that because the car is covered with ice or snow or something and you need to thaw it off. But normally, 1 minute at max, and then drive the car gently until it reaches normal operating temperature. Now, gently doesn't mean go slow. It means don't put your foot on the floorboard to accelerate. I mean, you can drive 60 miles an hour, 70 miles an hour, but don't, when you take off from a traffic light, don't slam it to the floor, because that is what can do damage. Accelerate gently. Now, do that until it reaches normal temperature, and you have warmed up all of these parts because the car is moving. The engine is doing work, so as it does work, it warms up the oil. You're warming up the power steering. You're warming up the transmission. You're warming up all of these ancillary parts on the car because you're making them work, number one. And number two, the car is moving, so all of the bearings and everything warm up. So that's how you go about doing that. And as I say, some days you may have a layer of ice or something on the car and you need to thaw that off. But, you know, when that happens, of course, you have to let it run longer. But don't make a habit of it. It is not good for the car. See, also, when it's sitting and idling and not doing any work, the engine produces a lot more moisture. And that moisture gets into the oil. And if you aren't driving the car to raise the oil temperature, then the oil doesn't get hot enough to cause the moisture to evaporate. And although I know they say oil and water doesn't mix, I can tell you that in a crankcase with things whirling around in there, it does mix. And what that does for your car is as this water mixes with the oil, it makes the oil thicker. So let's say your car requires a 5W20 oil, 20 being the hot viscosity or thickness of the oil, 5 being the cold. We have taken oil samples out of cars where they have a lot of this warm-up period and stuff like that, a lot of idling, and send it to a lab, and the 5W20 oil has become something approaching 80 or 90 weight. So it's almost like gear oil. It's real thick. And that means that every time you start the car, this thicker oil, and the thicker oil is caused by the moisture being whipped up into the oil. That thicker oil takes longer to circulate through the engine. So the longer it takes to circulate through the engine, the more wear you get. The other thing is thicker oil will increase oil pressure, but it reduces the volume of oil that can flow through the engine. So you may have reduced oil volume, and that can lead to excessive wear. So 1 minute, 2 minutes at most, unless there are extenuating circumstances. All right, now, and what's better, direct injection or naturally aspirated engines for reliability? Well, first, direct injection has nothing to do with naturally aspirated. Naturally aspirated means that the engine doesn't have a turbocharger or a supercharger. It uses the natural air pressure to get air into the engine. Turbos and superchargers force air in. It's forced induction. Has nothing to do with the type of fuel injection. So you have direct fuel injection, which is the newest style, or you have sequential injection. Now, what is the difference between them? Well, direct injection improves performance markedly, improves fuel economy, reduces emissions, and for the most part is pretty reliable as far as the injection itself is concerned. But you have to be more attuned to changing oil, because on direct injection, because it's being injected into the cylinder where the air is already compressed, the injection process requires very high pressure, thousands of psi. So sometimes 15,000 or more. So on the engine is going to be a high pressure fuel pump. This high pressure fuel pump is typically driven off one of the camshafts, and it super pressurizes the fuel going to the injectors, and then the injectors inject it into the already pressurized cylinder. Well, that pump has to be lubricated, and if you're not good about changing oil, it will expire big time. Big time in the form of dollars gone. So if you're really good about maintenance, chances are you won't have any problem as far as the injection system itself is concerned. But then you have the fact that unless you put a catch can or something like that on the crankcase breather system, you could very well wind up with a situation where you have carbon that builds up on the backs of the intake valves. See, gasoline has additives in it to help clean away carbon and so on, and you can put additives in the fuel tank that will clean away carbon deposits, but direct injection injects straight into the cylinders, where sequential injection, it shoots the gasoline across the back of the intake valve. So the detergents in the intake valve or in the gasoline clean the backs of the intake valves. And without that injection spraying gasoline onto the valves, what you wind up with is fumes from the crankcase, the PCV system, that are oily, that come into the intake And then as they pass over the hot intake valves, some of the oil that's in those fumes attaches itself to the back of the valves and over time forms carbon. So with direct injection, you will more than likely have more maintenance on valves and so on. So you may have to periodically do a injection, or not a fuel injection, but an induction system cleaning with special tools that put a chemical through the intake to clean up those valves. So the systems themselves, pretty much the same as far as reliability is concerned. Stuff affected by the fuel injection is probably going to be more expensive on direct injection. So hope that answers your question. All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back on Goss's Garage.
Operators are standing by to take your call for Pat at 844-885-4677. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
Think you'll pocket a lot more money if you sell rather than trade your car? Perhaps, but appearance sells cars, and your poor car is a bit grungy. There's dull paint, that ugly coffee stain on the seat, and a sweaty arm stain on the door, plus crumbs in every crack and crevice. Yep, when you look close, it's kind of ugly, and sadly for you, most used cars are bought on looks more than condition. That means a good cleanup job or pay a couple $100 to have it done. Next, because many used car buyers pull dipsticks and check fluids, you should clean the engine bay and change all the fluids. Buyers usually don't know what's good or bad, but someone on the internet says smart shoppers pull dipsticks, so buyers pull dipsticks, which often leads to questions about service and possible problems. Also, if the tires show any wear, buyers may assume there are worn front end parts. Don't forget the high cost of ads so people know it's for sale. And the questions. Is there a warranty? Will you take a trade? Is it inspected? Will you take a check? Can I give you $100 down and $100 a week? And so on. Now, a biggie. You might actually be risking your life, too. Where do you safely show a car so you don't have strangers eyeballing you and your home or trying to steal the car? When you look at the aggravation, work, expense, and dangers of selling a car, trading often looks really good. I get lots of air filter questions, and one of the most common deals with why air filters need to be replaced so often. Well, actually, they usually don't. Yet many drivers wind up buying a new air filter at every oil change, which is utterly ridiculous. Drivers say techs tell them if they don't buy a new air filter, they'll waste a lot of gas. Maybe that statement comes from ignorance or maybe dishonesty, but either way, you lose. Decades ago, dirty air filters did waste gas, but today, not so much. Cars now use a sensor to measure the air coming through the air filter, and computers to mix exactly the right amount of gas to match that air. So even though a dirty air filter reduces airflow into the engine, it doesn't affect gas mileage because the computer is always precisely matching fuel to the incoming air. In other words, a dirty filter means less air, and less air means less gas, so there's never an imbalance between air and fuel. Certainly when a filter gets really, really dirty, it can cause performance problems, but even then it may not affect gas mileage. So how long do air filters last? Unless you drive in really dusty conditions, air filters usually last 30 to 60,000 miles. Overselling of air filters is an enormous problem, and the best way not to be taken is to learn how to check your own air filter and check it twice a year.
Now, back to Goss's Garage with your host, Pat Goss.
Oh my goodness, candy canes around the neck. Ouch, that hurts, I think. I don't know, I haven't tried to pose for that yet, but we'll see as the day goes on. It's going to take a mighty big candy cane to go around my neck anyway. I Please subscribe to Goss's Garage on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook. And for more car tips, tricks, and money-saving ideas, visit goss-garage.com. 844-885-4677. If you would like to talk about cars or something related to cars, give me a call. Now, Edmund, this is kind of interesting. You know, everybody seems to think that there's some magical tool that you hook up and it gives you answers. Now, these magical tools, they give you information, but it's up to a technician to interpret that information to get to an answer. So you see all of these things that, oh, plug this into your dash and it'll save you thousands because you'll never have to pay for a diagnosis again. That is hogwash. It's bull poo. And the fact of the matter is that without humans to understand what they're looking at and interpret the information, it winds up being just meaningless. Well, anyway, Edmund has a 97 Nissan Maxima. It's a GLE and 135,000 miles on it. He says the car runs fine after initial startup. However, after slight warm-up of about 6 minutes, continuous pulsing, bucking, hesitation at speed, 35 to 45 miles per hour, etc., that does not go away. In addition, after this slight warm-up, one transmission shift, sometimes lengthened and harder, but this disappears after a while. But the aforementioned pulsing, bucking, hesitation at speed continues. Car's also getting poor gas mileage. Let's see. Emissions test shows very high HC and so on. Oxides of nitrogen, we don't care about that. Car apparently blowing out bottom seal of the EGR, exhaust gas recirculation, BPT, the back pressure transducer. Says I replaced the EGR BPT valve and tube assembly bypass with Nissan parts because of an OBD2 code. Also cleaned throttle body and IAC. Replaced original cracked knock sensor with a Nissan one. Local shop replaced Nissan EGR, the back pressure transducer valve again because seal on bottom of valve blown out. Seal on Nissan back pressure transducer valve blew out again in less than 200 miles. And on it goes. So I told Edmund, let's see, what did I tell him? The first thing that I asked Edmund, do you have any of the data stream readings? See, he's been to shops. Shops are looking for codes. Maybe there are codes, maybe there aren't codes. But codes are not the answer to much of anything. So I asked Edmund about the data stream readings. Now, data stream, when you hook up one of these scan tools to the interface under the dash, you can read all kinds of data, things that are going on in the system. And I asked him, do you have any data stream readings such as short and long-term fuel trim? That is going to tell us a bunch of stuff about what's happening as far as fuel is concerned. Now, there's very low vacuum, so long and short-term fuel trim would tell us if the computer is trying to compensate for some problem in the engine by trimming the fuel, either over a long period of time or a short period of time. I asked him if he had mass airflow readings, which would tell us if the MAF sensor is reading the amount of air coming into the engine properly so that the computer can mix the proper amount of fuel. I asked if he had the IAT reading. That's the inlet air temperature reading. Again, we've got poor performance, low gas mileage, and so on. The temperature of the air coming through the mass airflow sensor has to be read because colder air has to have a different amount of fuel than hot air. So all of those things we need to know. Coolant temperature sensor reading. That's how the computer knows that the engine is cold. And when an engine is cold, the fuel doesn't burn as well. We have to put more fuel into a cold engine than we do a hot engine. Well, if the engine has warmed up, but the coolant temperature sensor is giving a false reading, then the computer thinks the engine is cold and keeps that rich mixture, which would apply or would account for the problem with low fuel mileage and a lot of this other. Then I told him that also the blowing of the EGR transducer gasket repeatedly sounds like a case of a clogged EGR passage, and probably it might have a weak ignition coil on it, which could cause that stumbling. Well, he writes back to me, and he says, thanks for the prompt response, all underlined, of course. Thanks and your attention. It is more than anyone could expect, considering your very busy schedule, valuable time, and lack of a charge. I am not a technician. I just replace parts and do the maintenance you and Nissan suggest. As such, I have none of the data stream readings. Oh boy. So now we know that nobody has really checked anything on this car. Everything has been seat of the pants. Though the shop I brought it to apparently checked one or more of these, but found nothing. One or more out of, on that car, probably 100 different bits of information. So one or more, yeah, okay. That doesn't make any sense. The shop's best guess was carbonized valves and to use premium gas and BG44K. I totally disagree with that, but tried it anyway without success. Based on this diagnosis, I have lost confidence in the shop's ability. I agree with your analysis, albeit knowing that it was done without seeing the car. In that regard, I previously replaced tested bad ignition coil and so on. Should a competent shop be able to solve this problem? Yeah, a competent shop should. Now here's the deal with this. Edmund decided, even though he's 50 miles away, that it might be in his best interest to bring it to one of my shops. So he brought it to my Crofton, Maryland shop, and lo and behold, we did some of the basic testing on it, and I guess this has been going on for some time, and a couple, 3 hours later, we have analyzed the data stream information and so on, and guess what? This car has huge back pressure in the exhaust system. Now that back pressure was what was causing the gasket to blow out on the EGR transducer. Just too much pressure. All right, now what could cause pressure in the exhaust system? Well, the most typical thing is going to be a melted catalytic converter. So, what do? We check the catalytic converters, and sure enough, catalytic converters melted big time. And, you know, what has been going on with replacing all of these parts and back and forth and so on, with no one doing any kind of meaningful testing, here's what we wind up with. And sure enough, we put new cats on it, and problem gone. So there is knowledge involved here. You have to know how to perform these tests and what you're looking at in the test data. All right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk to Terry, who has a question. I don't know what his question is. Let's see. Terry, well, we'll get on that coming up right here on Goss's Garage.
Stay tuned. Pat will take your calls next at 844-885-4677. That's 844-885-GOSS. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
Space Saver spare tires sure do look silly, but if you use them properly, they will get you home safely. Now, a common problem with them is low air pressure. Spares are buried in the trunk and no one ever seems to check their pressure. Plus, they typically require much higher pressure than your regular tires. Also, Space Saver spares have limits on how far and how fast you can drive on them. Bottom line, always read and follow the caution warnings on their labels and sidewalls. Oh yeah, don't be one of those poor schmucks with a flat tire and a flat spare. Check your spare once a month. While checking the spare, look at the jack handle, and the lug wrench to be sure everything is there and in working order. The best spare tire in the world is useless without the tools to put it on the car. Some cars may even require special lug nuts to mount the spare. If those special lug nuts are missing, you will have no safe way to use your spare. Do you use the proper strategy when buying replacement parts for your car or truck? Hi, I'm Pat Goss for Goss's Garage, and I've noticed that many of you who buy auto parts make a huge mistake. You shop for one and only one thing: price. Now, naturally, price is important, but quality is more important. When you buy the cheapest part in town, you may sacrifice quality, and less quality often means shorter life and less reliability. In some cases, the cheapest part may even compromise vehicle safety. For the best value from the parts you buy, look for the lowest price, but only on high-quality parts. When you compare prices, be sure you're comparing parts that have the same specifications. And never buy a part with a lower rating than your car requires. What many drivers don't realize is cheap can be very costly in the end. Quality usually costs less per mile over the long haul. I'm Pat Goss for Goss's Garage.
This is Goss's Garage with Pat Goss. Call the show now at 844-885-4677. That's 844-885-GOSS. And now, Pat Goss.
Hey, for those of you enjoying Goss's Garage on TuneIn.com, please note our new show time every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. All right, Lynn says, Pat, as the holiday season is upon us, please share any childhood memories of your earliest relationships with cars. First time you ever drove one, first model car kit, your favorite car as a kid, first car you ever raced, etc. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you and your shop and media crew. Lynn. All right, well, Lynn, right back at you on Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. All right, earliest relationships with cars. See, I was not a big car nut. My first car I bought sitting out in a field. It was some old antique Chrysler. And as memory serves, I think I paid the guy $5 or $6 for this thing. Weeds growing up through it and all such as that. But I put it together and made it work and never drove it on the street. I was too young, didn't have a license. And we used to have, back up in New York, in the country up there, there were these dirt roads that were private property that you could drive on. I drove that thing all over those back roads, but never on a public highway. And eventually the engine gave up in it because it was old and tired anyway. And then I found another one, a Studebaker, which I was enthralled with the design of it. And I paid $25 for that when it was sitting beside a barn, and gradually built that into a car that I ultimately put on the street many years later. It was a 53 Starlight Coupe. It was a 6-cylinder. Later in its life, I changed it. I put a Cadillac V8 in it, and which was kind of the thing to do. And that was the first car that I raced. But in the meantime, see, my father passed away when I was almost 13 years old, and we had absolutely zero money because my mother worked in an electronics plant for 50 or 60 cents an hour. So we had to come up with money somehow. And one day coming home from school, I walked past a body shop, and the doors were open. I was watching these guys do body work, and I said, geez, I could do that. And so what I did, I said, that might be a way to make some money. I went to the library, got some books, read on how to do it, practiced, actually on that Studebaker, practiced doing body work and so on, making it something that I was familiar with. And I opened kind of a little part-time business doing body work. Well, I guess I was pretty good at it because it grew. And by the time I was a senior in high school, I had a very large body shop. And I had a lot of people working for me and made a reasonable amount of money and helped my mother out. So that was the thing. As far as first car kit, I never built a model car. I built real ones, built a lot of real ones, but never a car kit because of a number of things, but primarily because we had no money for things like that. You know, that was a real luxury. And what I had to go through to get the $25 for that Studebaker was, you know, it took me a long time of doing odd jobs and so on to get that together. But anyway, that is how all of that came about. And, you know, after that, I went into doing electronics work and various things like that, which was my original field. But, you know, the fact of the matter is that when I was working for somebody else, I didn't like the politics because where I was working, it was very political, didn't have anything to do with your abilities or your anything at all as far as what you could produce. What it amounted to was who you were friends with and who you kissed up to in order to get ahead. And I'm not the type that plays that game at all. And I got to thinking about it. I said, gee, you know, cars are pretty simple compared to this electronic stuff that I'm doing. So, you know, maybe I will just go back to fixing cars. You know, I was pretty good at it when I was a kid, and I ought to be better at it now. So I left the electronics field, opened a shop, and still doing it all these years later. So it was kind of an interesting story because, you know, I didn't have any grand plan. My grand plan was totally different. It wasn't even close to being this way, you know, with cars or anything like that. So, gosh, you know, and it's been fun. I really have enjoyed it as far as the radio and TV goes. That has been, again, no grand plan. What happened was, at one point, the county government here in Maryland, Prince George's County, they came to me and asked me if I would consider teaching in an adult education class for them about automobiles. I said, sure, I'll try anything once. And I did, and it was quite successful. And it grew, and it grew, and it grew, and I'm doing this adult education stuff. And it evolved, based on the students' questions, it evolved into kind of a consumer class. And I was pointing out some of the fallacies and some of the crooked stuff that was going on. And that led to a local newspaper doing a story on me. That led to the Washington Post doing a major feature story on me. Then one of the network TV shows came to me and said, Pat, you appear to be able to walk and talk and do it at the same time. How would you like to do some spots for us? Sure, why not? And that, of course, I did that. That led to interest from MotorWeek. John Davis and I, we have been MotorWeek since show number 1. And all the rest of it has been spin-offs from MotorWeek and these classes and stuff like that. So I would like to say that I planned all of this and it was going to be some wonderful, great thing, but I'm sorry, nothing of the kind. Just the way it worked out. All right, folks, we have music. We have done it. Thank you for listening. Thanks to Steve McMillan and George Stockton for producing today's show. For everyone here at Goss's Garage, I'm Pat Goss. I want to wish you a very, very Merry Christmas. Until next time, please be safe. Drive gently. We'll see ya.